Okay, so I want to talk about why men hate women. Because sometimes you'll see these posts like, why do you hate us? Okay, which is starting to have this sort of, I don't know, gaslighty main character vibe. But basically, men hate women. One of the big reasons or factors is abusive mothers. Okay, so women are almost experts on why, say, like if you're walking behind a woman at night, why she might jump or fear or treat you with suspicion or maybe even aggression, right? If she had this sort of prior experience with violence with men, maybe it's a partner, maybe it's a father, something like that, right? Experts, they'll swoop in, like, expecting that we show them grace and maybe even coddle them a bit in this for their behavior, right? It's the trauma, right? And like why you'll hold your keys when you're walking at night because of the potential trauma and this type of thing in the fourth. Okay. Um well, um the majority of mothers globally abuse their sons on some level. Okay, either emotionally and or physically. I would say like 90% do. A larger chunk is, I think, emotional, but that still can be abusive, right? But then additionally, there's physical abuse, which I believe includes spanking. And then sometimes that can be extreme. I would say it's a small but significant number where I would say like at least 10%. It's almost going towards like torture level. Severely abusive mothers. Okay, and this is not saying like this is only mothers, or this is um all their fault. This is in the context of why do a lot of men hate women. This is the reason. It's abusive mothers. So a lot of women, society, what do we just expect that trauma to magically disappear when men become adults? That doesn't happen for women. That doesn't happen for girls. So but we expect that to happen with sons or something. That trauma is just gonna magically disappear. Those spankings, that just left that just stayed then and there, right? Spankings don't cause any level of trauma or effects. I don't think so. Okay. A lot of people seem to have this sort of bully style of parenting, right? It's almost normalized or even like joked about, right? I don't believe that it's natural. I don't believe maybe it's natural, but it's not organic. This sort of authoritarian bully style of parenting. Because then if you look at the more emotional side of abuse, parents take this, again, authoritarian bully style of proportion, basically almost like aggressively dominating their child, which I only think is done by sort of people who aren't ready to be parents, um, immature people, people who are dealing with their own trauma. And this is not saying like people shouldn't have children, but it seems like a lot of people should be delaying having children. There's no reason to not have a child until you're like 25, 26, 27, especially if you're dealing, if you need to mature or if you need to explore and resolve your trauma. And I'm not, it's taboo to say, but maybe there are some people, smaller minority, that shouldn't procreate because the trauma is just going to take too long to resolve, or it will, people don't want to explore that, or, some other social reason. Okay. But, um, yeah. So they, you know, if you're immature, this, that, and the fourth, you're going to take a more aggressive, authoritarian, bully approach to raising a child. If you do that to your son, there's going to be an effect. For example, people will talk about sort of friction in the workplace between men and women. Okay, well, if men are sort of right, there can sometimes be a power struggle. Well, what's happening is that these men are sort of being triggered or reliving these situations where their mother probably sort of dominated them. You know, this sort of power struggle they have with their parents, right? And this sort of just the same way. I'm not saying that it's okay or that it's rational, but then again, we'll understand. We seem to magically understand when it's just literally anatomy, where a male is involved and that reminds them of their father or their partner or who this attacker or whoever was involved in this trauma with this woman. Same thing. And then especially if it's like sometimes women, not because they're women, but because people can be sort of aggressive in court and this, that, and the fourth. And did I say in court? Or at work, right? And it's triggering. It's kind of like if you kind of beat a dog with a rake or something, and then that dog moves to a new home, and then you kind of pull out a rake and you're trying to walk past it, leaving weed. It's gonna, you know, it's not just the anatomy as a woman, but it's the same sort of bullying, trying to dominate behavior, which can just happen. But that will, a power struggle will ensue because you just triggered the guy having that sort of emotional trauma thing. And then that's going to be enhanced if that sort of physical trauma was sort of involved. But then again, this goes into why do men hate women and aggression, animosity type of thing. Maybe even some attacks uh, because their mothers abused them. Okay, and the trauma just doesn't magically disappear. There's an animosity towards women. I think there's an issue where we do sort of overemphasize. I know there's just this weird hyperlogical approach to society, which we sort of started registering people as objects when we overemphasize things like sex. Or like sometimes I feel like we even treat kids like objects because we're like emphasizing they're a kid, kid, kid. Okay, they're a person first. They're a guy in first. It shouldn't be an identifier. It should be a descriptor. They're a kid. It's a description. But they're their name. They're a Gaian. They're a person. They're an individual. They have a personality. They're not just a kid, right? And I feel like that can be an issue. But it enhances the issue where this woman, mother, you know, was emotionally and or physically abusive. Okay, so I think that's where why a lot of men um, hate women. Even men who still have close relationships with their mother, maybe that might even be having some sort of trauma bond sort of vibes there. Maybe you shouldn't have a close relationship with your mother if she was very abusive. Why do you? But another thing is a lot of these women um, are sort of have misandric vibes or male phobic vibes, bullphobic vibe. I don't know what you want to call it, but this society is currently, I just feel like a bit hostile towards men. It would rather us be women. It wants to mold us in the image of women. Um, right? It's this sort of um, human domestication thing going on where they want to turn us into like domesticated humans, I guess. And men have a harder problem with that process. And I think that kind of leaks into parenting and men, where mothers, I'm saying men can pick up on that, right? Women are, mothers are spanking their sons. It's kind of almost targeting that maleness, that more earthiness, right? If you know, uh, I would say men are more earthy and women are more watery, right? Everyone has both, right? But men lean a little more earthy, women generally lean more watery. Women, mothers sort of target that earthiness, and I think we can pick up on that, and we know that where, like why that's there's that extra targeting. Like women don't like the rambunctious sons sometimes. They're more, and they kind of beat that behavior out of them. They're targeting that. I guess it's not exactly maleness, but whatever. Um, and we pick up on that too, and that's another reason why there's this animosity towards women, right? Um, okay, and then that's sometimes even enhanced, like where mothers are resentful for their husbands, or especially like if you look like, if you're separated, divorced, baby daddy situation, or maybe even the father was abusive, right? The mother is bitter, right, and will abuse their sons extra and something like that. That could be picked up on, right? And so you develop this sort of animosity towards women because it's almost like this antagonistic force. And then you're going out in society, and a lot of women have those vibes because we are very violent towards each other, but it's sort of, you know right, women's a lot of women do have these sort of misandric vibes. It's pretty obvious with the whole, you know years and years of men are trash, I hate men, castrate men sort of vibes that have been going on in these past few years. Sometimes women are not the biggest fan of man. You can feel that in interactions and experiences. Well, um, men are not that big fans of women either, and it's because of those things. And I think it's worse sometimes because you guys' whole shtick is like, "Why do you hate us?" You kind of frame yourself, and there's even some societal backing as these poor little innocent lambs. Where is this coming from? You can be very harsh and mean and violent, not because of your women. Not, it's not women. It's just people. There's like a gaslighting thing going on here. Even the whole, why do you have, not only is that like very melodramatic telenovela soap opera, but it's just it has a gaslighting quality because you're can be mean and aggressive and violent starting from like childhood, I'm guessing, because so like some of these mothers are literally like, it's not totally uncommon for mothers to murder their children. Um, uh, you know, foster care because of beatings, abuse, severe. Uh, how many mothers spank their children? That's going to have an impact into adulthood. Like, and it's also enhanced because men, for very long, you get that sort of patriarchal programming where men don't feel, men don't have emotions, so it kind of becomes super frozen, where men aren't processing their emotions and traumas ever. Um, and I think some women have accountability too, because I don't even know if it's performative anymore, where women will, some feminists will acknowledge that and they want that. But for some of that, it's even performative because, from what I can see, a lot of women don't do maintain that sort of patriarchal programming themselves, where um, you don't like seeing men emotional, you don't like seeing men vulnerable. Sometimes it seems like you guys have trademarked it, like that's our territory. Don't infringe on our trademark. Only we can be emotional and dramatic. Like it's taking away from your spotlight and that type of thing. And then there's the whole you are attracted to Iron Men, these hyper stoic men, daddy, but that's reinforcing this sort of emotional handicap that a lot of men have, which perpetuates this sort of lack of empathy and holding on to trauma from childhood. Um, if you can't cry, you can't process your emotions. That's just how it's going to be. You'll never really resolve it. Um, but then a lot of women reinforce that too. Okay. Or then it's sort of like, and then extending of that, it's like, you don't want to feel, a lot of people treat men like these sort of anchors or something. And if they're expressing vulnerability, I know, I guess it's like a turnoff or something, but I wish people would kind of grow up. Like, you can stand on your own 2 feet as well. Less of this infantilized woman dependent thing would be nice. Um, which is burgeoning, which is blossoming. Um, but still. And yeah, so that's not saying that's all blaming from women. Like I said, it's patriarchal programming, and though women do also maintain patriarchy in a lot of ways, but it's mostly men, right? Um, Maintaining patriarchy, but it's contributing to these sort of, you know, angry, these misogynistic sort of men, or that's even a word, just hateful men. Okay. Um. So yeah, and this is not excusing anything because again, it's still irrational. Like, I think it's rare cases where women have, I mean, sometimes it does get out of hand, type of thing. Um, you know, but that's still an explanation. That still is a factor onto why a lot of men hate women. And I don't know, that's the only solutions I can see is like a lot of people should be delaying. Some people shouldn't have children. Some people should delay being having children. I think we need to reassess this sort of punitive bullying style of parenting. I don't think spanking is ever valid, except in extreme cases, like maybe if they're trying to continuously touch fire or something, but it's not needed. So why would you do it? If you feel like you need to spank your child, you're just a poor parent. Like, because it's possible to discipline a child without it. So why would you do it if it's possible? If a dog can be trained to be obedient without spanking, a child, which is more intelligent, so the dog could as well. And the goal is not even for a child to be obedient. So it shouldn't be that hard. It's some sort of poor choices that led up to you feeling like you need to spank your child. Okay. Did you have them before you were monetarily stable? Did you have them before you were mature? Did you have them before you resolved your own trauma? Did stuff like that? And again, this is not just blaming women, this is in context. Okay? But you know what I'm saying. Um, and then of course fathers do bully their sons, but maybe there is something to that. Maybe that's why a lot of men kill men. Invites, trigger this, that, and the fourth, and that sort of thing. But yeah, that's why I believe a lot of um, and then it's just sort of perpetuated and added on through in society because it's like um, just the typical interactions, and then like you guys aren't like there's this thing where you guys like before I've mentioned stuff like this and women act like I know a lot of people seem to perceive that you're like innocent, nice people when most of you aren't. And again, that's not bashing women. It's just like people aren't. How could you in this society? Like I'm exploring my trauma and like I have like TV level like where where you're having flashbacks and like I just have bad encounters with women like older sisters uh just you know tons of encounters, just hurtful encounters. I think a lot of men experience that. Like, and there's that thing where you guys seem to like, you just seem justified with being mean. Like, you guys perceive yourself as like pixies, but you're just not. None of you are. Like, it's like that same thing. Like, uh, just that never hit women thing. Why? Because we don't have pain receptors. Like, how the hell do you perceive yourself? Like, to ever have let that come out of your mouth. So if someone's trying to hit me with a frying pan, never hit them. If it's a 6'4" MMA fighter, don't hit them back. Like that sort of attitude just makes everything worse. Like that you guys are innocent, nice, poor little victims. Like on top of everything, that's just the reason. Like, um, yeah, it's the gaslighting. Basically, even now, it's still like with these sort of things where you assume that the woman was a poor little innocent and victim in these sort of domestic disputes, even though the evidence keeps pointing to the contrary. And that type of thing. But yeah, Um, I don't like women. Most of you. I don't like most men because I find most of you mean. And it's just like a spit in the face just to be, you know, like it's just a very minimizing, omitting, dismissing energy. Like to have someone being like I remember I made a video where I was like saying why I'm not a feminist, and I mentioned that um it that there's like in feminist spaces like you can there'll be like these minorities of people, and I was saying it's like a minority of people who are like have these like animosities or men, like men are trash attitude, and a lot of women were like offended by that, like so you're innocent angelic beings that are never being, and it was so I found that so offensive because it was like around the time like the big trend was men are trash, so that and I was joining in on that sometimes, but eventually it will wear on you, and that's all I was saying. Like it's like the minority. Like you could be like I was on used to go to this like lesbian website, and it was mostly blue. But then sometimes there were comments like little comments like one comment was like because men suck or something like that. So you're saying I imagined it. It's like very gaslighty energy type of thing. Or like I remember like I was in like Hawaii and this guy was like it was like early in the morning and he said something and the woman was just like like chew them out from the thing. You could just he was like this, but like if you mention that like you guys have like or how you try to like downplay PMS, like you kind of acknowledge that you can be mean and fierce, but then you kind of don't acknowledge it, or it's like how can you acknowledge like you're kind of low key when you're trying to say like PMS is real, so you acknowledge that you can be mean and fierce and violent and hurtful, but at the same time you don't. On top of like so many mothers are like unstable, violent, poor mothers. Like I don't know what to say, but that's the reason I don't really care. Like I care about people, but I don't care about men. Does that make sense? I don't care about men. I don't care about women. I don't care about white people. I don't care about black people. I don't care about people. I just care about people. But this sort of identity cultism where we're emphasizing like our sexes and artificial identities like gender and race and like technical things like tribal culture and like I don't care what happens to Asian identified people or black identified people or white identified people or women or men. Like if we're not talking about societal overhauls, civic issues, I could care less. Okay. And sometimes it's hard to care about even.